I know a few more people are just logging in, but we're going to make a kick-off with our introductions. We have a lot to cover in 1 hour. We have a wonderful conversation lined up for you. We're focusing on nutritious foods today. Nutritious foods for clients at the base of the pyramid. How can we build demand, and not just one-off demand, but repeat usage? Marty van Leeren, the Director of Maternal, Infant and Young Child Nutrition at GAIN, is our main speaker today in this first webinar of a series of 2. Marty is a public health nutritionist with 25 years experience in both public and private sectors. We're going to have comments from Lucy Klaasveld-McGrath, who's a Senior Project Manager at Hystra, who I'm sure you've seen before if you've joined our webinars before, who's worked with over 30 companies on marketing, and also, not surprisingly, has experience in both private and public sectors. Because as we know, nutrition is very much a public and private sector joint effort. I'll be facilitating the conversation today and taking your questions that you're welcome to put in at any time. The webinar is hosted by the Practitioner Hub for Inclusive Business. I'm the editor of that. If you haven't joined the Practitioner Hub, please do sign up and you'll get our monthly newsletters. And our most recent one was indeed on nutrition at the base of the pyramid and what inclusive business can do. Our whole series on nutrition, the newsletter and this webinar and the next webinar, are sponsored by the UK Department for International Development. So many thanks to them. Now, firstly, I'm going to go through a few rules of engagement. One is please engage, and we are going to be seeking your engagement by using polls. If you've been on a webinar with us before, you know about this. So our first poll today is indeed to find out if you've been on a Hub webinar before. So you can see the poll on your screen. Could you please just tick yes or no? We'll give you about 10 seconds for this one because it's a really easy one. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We close the poll and you'll see the results. Okay, so most of you haven't. That's interesting. And there's a few people that didn't click on that poll, I think. But we've got 94 people who did, so thank you for that. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide and show you just 4 simple rules of the game. Type your questions in the chat function at any time. On the whole, we will take the questions at the end and I will facilitate that, but do put them in at any time. We'll send you a link to quick feedback afterwards. Please do fill it in. We get donor funding to run these webinars, but we do need your feedback to improve them and be able to say what use people got from them and how we can improve them. Join the discussion on Twitter during or afterwards. And you don't need to ask whether you can get the presentation because yes, you can. It will be on the web link for this whole series straight after the event. 4 very simple rules. Right. I'm now going to give Marty 1 minute and then Lucy 1 minute to tell us about their respective organizations, and then we'll get into the presentation. Marty, over to you.
Thank you, Caroline, for the introduction. So very few words on GAIN. GAIN is a very young organization, actually, but we have a huge reach. We are entirely focused on reducing malnutrition in all of its forms, in Africa, Asia, and also to a lesser extent in Latin America. We work through multi-sector approaches, and that means that we work with government, civil society, but also with businesses. And that's a bit, I think, where GAIN sets itself apart from some other non-governmental organizations. I think you're still controlling, so click to the next one. Our key focus areas are 4. The biggest focus area is what we call large-scale food fortification. That includes putting nutrients, so minerals and vitamins, into products like flour, like vegetable oil, or even salt iodization. That is where GAIN started and where I think we're best known for. And through our efforts, we're already reaching, with partners, of course, more than 800 million people with fortified foods. The second one, Nutrition for Women and Children, is the program that I'm responsible for. And that is, as you understand, focusing on vulnerable group, whereas the large-scale food fortification is on the entire population. The third program we have is on agriculture and nutrition. And so there we're specifically zooming in, how can agriculture help produce nutritious foods? How can we improve nutrition of farmers? The last field of expertise brings together several points, and that is on the fact that GAIN does work with business. We try to bridge that gap between business and others on nutrition. For instance, we are co-chairing the SUN, Scaling Up Nutrition Movement's business network, but we also have brought together a business platform for nutrition research. And so that is just an example of how we try to bring businesses in, holding them accountable to do good for nutrition and not harm. So over to Lucy.
Thank you very much. Lucy.
Thank you. So I'm from Hystra, an even younger organization. We started in 2009. Hystra stands for Hybrid Strategies Consulting. We are basically a global consulting firm specialized in inclusive business and base of the pyramid markets. We call what we do hybrid strategies in the sense that they're really at the frontier between social and business. We use business strategies to have social impact. Our key sectors, as you can see, we've worked in quite a few. Our methodology is always the same. We learn from what exists. We look for the best business models with a social impact in a given sector. And from these models, we try to replicate them, scale them up, or merge them to have even more impact, working either with large corporations to help them find business models that make sense for them and have a social impact, or with NGOs to make them more financially sustainable, or with foundations who want to support these new type of enterprise called social enterprises. So we work a little bit across the spectrum in all the sectors you see there, always trying to have the most impact possible via business solutions.
Thank you both. So I think the key point we have is that we have a lot of nutrition expertise, particularly in Marty and in a lot of the people on the webinar, but we also have inclusive business expertise, which is about business at the base of the pyramid. So as with all these discussions, it's going to be a good blending of different types of expertise. We need to find out a little bit more about where you are from, having heard about the panelists. So second poll, please click on which type of organization you work for, as we understand from the registration list there's a pretty broad range. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. Let's see the results. As I said, quite a broad range, 18% consultants and 16% international or regional business, 43% NGO, civil society and not-for-profit, and a good scattering across the rest. Interesting. Thank you very much. So now we will hand over to Marty.
I've taken control, Caroline.
No,
all is fine.
It's all yours.
Thank
Thanks
you so
Marty.
much. I think it's very exciting to look at the mixture of the participants in this webinar. It's business, it's actually a lot of non-for-profit people, and we didn't ask who works in nutrition, but I expect it's a nice mix between people that are nutrition experts and people that know nothing about nutrition. So I'll try to cater to all of your expectations and your different needs. Forgive me if I'm jumping too quick to something that's specifically nutrition focused. The first slide is actually about some statistics, the ugly truth about malnutrition, the big numbers that are still out there. 160 million children are stunted. What does it mean? Stunting is a measure for chronic malnutrition, and it actually means that children haven't grown up to their full potential. They're too short, basically, for their age. Underneath there, 50 million children are wasted. Wasting is a measure for acute malnutrition, which basically means that children are too thin for their height, so they're really thin. But on the other hand, you see also there are 600 million people or adults that are obese. So that is amazing. That and we've seen that obesity is taking over. So the overnutrition problems are taking over from undernutrition, but are still, for us, it's both malnutrition. And then when we're talking about anemia, and that's a little bit different from iron deficiency, but still, anemia figures are amazing across the world, and that touches both the developing and the underdeveloped worlds. So the problems are all out there, and that's why that's been the reason for scaling up efforts in nutrition, for more investments, and for people like you and me working in this field. If we're looking at the cause of malnutrition, I've just put a very simple sentence on this slide. It's about the interaction between poor quality diets and poor quality healthcare environments or services, as well as individual behaviors. But that's a very simplified version of a much more complex causal framework for malnutrition that I won't go into here because this is not a technical meeting. to solve the problem of malnutrition, we need actually everybody on board to get the solutions. And so in the past decades, I think it was mainly the public sector looking at solutions for malnutrition, but more and more there's a recognition that business does have a role to play, specifically food businesses. They can contribute to solving that malnutrition challenge. So specifically looking, if you're a food producer, looking at improving the availability, the accessibility, the affordability, and the use of nutritious foods is important. All of this, and I really want to make that point, of course, in the context of good nutrition practices. We do not want business to go loose and put products on the markets, because this is about products with a good nutrition profile. It can be fresh products, fruits and vegetables. It can be fortified products. We can talk about breast milk as a product produced by the mother, but maybe marketed as well. We need to take, however, with everything we're doing, the nutritional requirements and needs of the vulnerable population into mind. So that is my one thought for those that are the business people amongst you. In this slide, I'm showing again a framework that has led a lot of GAIN's work. In this framework, we bring together supply of nutritious foods and demand of nutritious foods. And together, we want that to lead to impact. This has led a lot of the thinking in GAIN on how we work with partners and where the investments have to go. What is important in the demand creation, that it's not just about awareness or a one-off use of the product. To have nutrition impact, again, we need to look at what is the right quantity, what is the right frequency, how do we get that nutrition impact. The webinar today deals mainly with the demand side of this framework, and then next week there's a second webinar that deals more with the supply side on this. So what do consumers want? When we think about demand creation, you know, we need to think about what the people that are going to use those products, what do they want? What are their wishes? And I actually want to ask you in a second poll, what do you think that consumers or mothers or fathers or whomever at the base of the pyramid, right? We're talking about low-income consumers. What do you think that they want? You can tick as many of these as you want. So please go ahead. What do you think consumers at the base of the pyramid want? Homegrown indigenous foods, or cheap processed foods, or imported exotic branded products? Or are they going for the healthy, nutritious stuff? Or do they go for what they just like, what the taste is good for? I just take Caroline's example, but I start counting at 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1. I hope you've had the time to tick your answers. And I think, I'm not sure, but I can see from all the percentages that definitely you have ticked more than one comments. Interesting. Yeah, the product that tastes best. And that is so good. I mean, I think that that is the best example, but I think all the others also are good answers. There's no just one reason, right, why consumers choose a food, or there's not one reason why they want something. But definitely the most important is, I'm not going to eat anything I don't like. So that is important. I can see from a very heavy focus on healthy and nutrition that we have got quite a number of nutrition experts in the room, or on, not in the room, online. And for the rest, it's a bit half-half. I'm going to talk through these a little bit. There's different reasons why people chose what they are growing at home, etc. It's available, it's cheap, and it's something that fits their habits, right? Cheap processed foods are often chosen because it's just easy to prepare, and because, of course, the price is low. Some people go for the more premium priced product that are important because they like the quality. It's more aspirational, and it's a word that I will use a bit more. And others definitely go for healthy, nutritious, but those are long-term benefits, and we may not see the impact of that immediately. But all of you, I think, agreed that if it doesn't taste good, I'm not going to eat it. So I want to give you one example about how can we bridge the gap between what the consumer wants and then what public health experts or nutritionists believe that they need in terms of nutrition. Since I'm working on maternal and infant nutrition, my example is on infant nutrition. Let me see, how do I get this down? Oh, so, right. So on the left, you see what do infants need? And that is where, let's say, the nutrition community focuses on, right? We start, what are the problems of malnutrition? Where are the nutrient gaps and how can we fill them? So we look for nutrient-dense foods. And for children 6 to 24 months, after 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding, children need additional complementary foods, we call them. And these foods need to be nutrient dense because the babies have very small stomachs. The foods need to be affordable because we're talking about low income consumers. And they need to be available for mothers. They need to be out there. So that's what we in the public health sector are working on. And we work a lot about compliance and effective use, right doses. But what about what mothers want? If you look at the the right side of the screen, mothers want all that's at the left, but they also want to give a food that their baby likes. If the baby spits it out, like when many babies do with spinach, it's difficult to continue giving that to the child. The mother also is very, very conscious of her time and all the other tasks she has to do. So it has to be easy to prepare, easy to get. They are conscious about what they think is high quality. That's quite subjective. So it's different from what a nutrition expert would say is high nutritional quality. But overall, all these points mean that what mothers are looking for is value for money, is a product that is responding to her needs, her wants, and what is relevant for her. And the last point is not the least. We really want to feed our children something that makes us look good as well as mothers. So this is an example where I try to give a couple of factors that are playing a role in the wants of consumers. Lucy, we discussed this before, and you had a nice example that you wanted to share with us.
Yes, first, having just become a mother, I have to say I agree with your what moms want. Indeed, as a mother, I don't, of course I want something that is good for my baby, but I also need something that is quick to prepare and easy to make because I just don't have the time. And you can imagine how much more time constrained a mother at the base of the pyramid will be. So a great solution that Nutrizaza initially and then Nutrifaso came with, these are two social businesses, the first one in Madagascar and the other one in Burkina Faso, both supported by French NGO GRET. So these social businesses, what they do is that they have these porridge that they've designed with nutrition experts so that it indeed fits the need of infants. I mean, starting from 6 months old when they need complementary foods. But instead of just selling it in sachet or distributing it through health centers, they've designed a very innovative distribution model through which they bring the warm porridge at breakfast time at the mother's doorstep, which effectively makes it very easy for mothers to feed it to their children because they just have to take the portion that the sales lady gives them or sells them, and it's ready for their child. So they don't need to prepare any extra food or anything. And this system has proved to work very well to get to a high level of penetration in these communities in a very short time frame. That's all I wanted to say.
Great. And I hope that somebody that is working on these projects may be attending, and then later in the discussion you could have maybe add a little bit to this comment by Lucy. So I think that if we're talking demand creation, what the consumer wants has to be left, right, and center of our approach. And in the following slides, I'm giving you, on top of what Lucy said, a couple of examples on how we address or how we can address the factors that influence demand. And the first one, no, actually, the first one was the convenience part, I think that was just said. The second one, of course, is price. Any marketeer knows that it's about price, convenience, and a third one we'll talk about. So price is important. And since we're talking here about people at the base of the pyramid, low-income consumers, price is key. But price does not always mean cheap. we have found in the experience of our projects, we have found that poor people are not only looking at price, they actually are looking at quality, and they don't want to pay the cheapest, but they want to make sure that the product will deliver on the promise, so that the product has some benefits for them, and that the quality that they buy is trustworthy. You can buy the cheapest product, but if you're disappointed by the quality, you will not invest the 2 cents you have again. So that quality is important. The benefits and the relevance, for instance, in small sizes or in convenience, are equally important. I rather spend a little bit, or 1 cent or 2 cents more on something that will earn me, let's say, 15 minutes in preparation time, correct? And then I think what we sometimes forget is that poor people do not want to be reminded of the fact that they are poor. They actually are looking at aspirational, at products that others that have a little bit more money are also using. They want to feel and be and act like them. And so that aspirational aspect is really important. And that is often brought to the table by branding or brands. And therefore, often people that have not much money to spend will still want to buy a product that is an international brand because they know it. I am again going to hand over to Lucy because we inserted a very nice graph here that shows an example of Ivory Coast on a product, the product that is in the picture, that has found a really nice price positioning.
Yes, so this graph basically represents the price of 100 grams of infant food in Côte d'Ivoire. We've compared all the different types of infant food that were available, from on the left side, the cheapest one, which was basic flour. Some mothers just used basic flour for their children, all the way to the most expensive product, which were branded imported products. So as you can see, they're 12 times more expensive. And you can see that there's a kind of a middle range option, which is the red one, the cheapest of the fortified foods option. It's still 8 times more expensive than the basic flour, but it's 30% cheaper than the most expensive ones. And this was actually from the company PKL, which is a social business in Ivory Coast. And they were managing to sell 10,000 meals a day of these products back when we looked at them. And all of their consumers, or nearly all of their consumers, were from relatively poor areas. And basically these mothers were really spending 8 times what they could otherwise spend for their kids. But they were doing this because they thought this was the right thing to do. And basically when I interviewed a few over there, they were saying, I want to buy this because this is the best I can afford for my child. It is an investment, but I want to be a good mother, and that is what I want to do. And they didn't want to spend less and have the very basic one. They were ready to pay more because they thought it was a good quality product.
Yeah, and so that product is the one you see in the picture, and the way it is presented and the packaging, it really inspires a good quality that is comparable to that of international brands. Now, the third point that I mentioned, every marketer knows about, so I'm sorry for the marketers online, but yes, consumers look at price, convenience, and taste. So, and you knew that, actually everybody knew it. So taste is really important, and taste comes with also choice. So what influences taste? It's colors, it's flavors, and those are aspects we really need to pay attention to. Not only for those businesses that are online or inclusive social businesses, but also when it comes to products that are going to be distributed for free by governments or by NGOs. If you have to eat the same porridge that is maybe given to you for free, day in, day out, the same flavor, it's becoming boring. And it may be stopping people from using the product, whereas that's not what we want. We want to encourage them to use the product. So sometimes we do not invest in different flavors or in colors because of cost concerns, but it may in the end lead to reduced usage. So that's why I really want to hammer on this specific point. It affects their perceptions and their use. The one point that I also want to make here, not sure it fits, but is that new product formats such as micronutrient powders, which are powders of vitamins and minerals that are nowadays recommended to put into the local porridges that mothers make for their children. They are new products. People don't have the habit, as we may do, to take a vitamin pill. And so that requires fitting them in existing habits or creating a new habit. That also is not easy. Sometimes I'm thinking on whether we should not think about adding flavors to those micronutrient powders. We're doing it on purpose, not adding it, but actually it might trigger the use if you add a flavor to it for people that do not have a habit. So going to the next slide, another poll, and I'll leave a little bit more time, but this is an easy one. You only have two choices. Which one of the following images would you like to respond to as a mother? The first one, very nice ethnic drawings, or the second set of pictures, which is more, I would say, modern world photographs. Not sure how the poll is coming up.
I think the poll has come up. It's on my screen. Are you not seeing it, Martin?
No, I'm not seeing it. But if it's on the other screens, please.
Lucy, do you see it? Okay, so I'm assuming the poll is there for everyone to see. So I think do a 5-second countdown, Marty.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Caroline, you have to give the answer since I'm not seeing it.
72% would respond to the second one, that's the one on the right, and 28% to the first one on the left.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I don't want to call a judgment on those, but the reason we're showing these images is because I think different sectors have been using different approaches, and I would say the images here on the right, on the left, are very much images that have been used in public sector already for quite a long time, and they have an educational message, very important educational messages. Whereas the other two images are more for, well, the first one definitely is from private sector for selling a product. Whereas the second one, by the way, I'll talk about it, is also a public sector example. But the difference is really that the first set is educational, whereas the second set of the images has more of an emotional connotation to it. And what we want with our tools or executions of how we want to draw people to use a product or to adopt a behavior is we want to trigger that, and emotions play a really important role in that. And in the first picture, the photograph, I must say, with the mother, you can see the love of the mother coming through the photograph. It's a beautiful, warm picture. The second photograph of the two babies, they are talking. This actually is taken from an advertisement that has been developed in Vietnam by Alive and Thrive, a well-known nutrition project. And these babies are talking to each other. Of course, they can't talk at that age, but it's being simulated, and it's so cute. It has an incredible, strong trigger. Everybody likes it, and it sticks into the minds of people that see this advertisement. And that's precisely what we want with our tools for demand creation. You want to have it sticking into people's minds. And they're not only educational, but also I think the emotions have a role to play, and we need to pay attention to that. So that was actually
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. Can you just clarify the second baby on the left, whether it's under 6 months and whether it's promoting any breast milk substitute?
No, sorry. You mean on the top here?
Yes.
You mean the photograph, right? Yes. On the top. Yeah.
No, they're not promoting. I was referring to. Maybe in the number 2 photo. Yeah, that'll be that one.
Yeah. So the baby in the, you mean, sorry, let me talk to both photographs. The first one is about a skin product. So there's nothing about food. I just took the picture because it was so, such a mother baby bonding. The second picture is actually saying the opposite of what you're saying. It says you need breast milk, and you don't need to give extra water to your child. Only breast milk is enough, because breast milk is both the drink and the food. In many countries, mothers believe that giving water to their child is needed, especially if it's very warm. But that would interfere with the exclusive breastfeeding parts. And mothers often think that doesn't matter, water, but the water can be contaminated and can be a source of infection. So I'm sorry, you're right to ask for that. What does it actually say, the message? The message says, give breast milk and you don't need to give additional water. And the babies are talking to each other and are also talking about that. Oh, I don't get water. Oh, why not? Right? Is that clear?
Thanks for the clarification. Let's roll on.
Good. Next one is about packaging and branding. And again, I've put up pictures at the left side that are products that are used either in public sector or products that are locally produced and sold. So you see some products that says that are ready to use therapeutic foods actually for treatment of malnourished babies. And then the Tom Brown picture is a porridge, a local mix of porridge that's being produced by a small local company, and I don't remember which country it is. But they're very simple packaging. And what we have learned is that branding and packaging actually do influence people's choices. And I come back to that aspirational part of it. People do not want products that they don't know what is in there, that they can't really read or looks too much like medicine. So the attractiveness of the packaging actually plays to the appeal and gives a perception of quality to the person that uses it. Moreover, I would say packaging is the first means of communication to somebody. And so using it for the right messaging and making these messages very clear, understandable, not too much writing, but a lot of icons can be helpful. The picture on the Desta packaging, Desta is an Ethiopian brand for micronutrient powders. So not a food, but a powder. That was developed with a lot of consumer testing. And we believe that it's important and worthwhile to invest in packaging and branding. Not to promote a commercial brand, but to really get into the mindset and really as a driver for choice with the consumers. I don't remember. Lucy, would you like to say something here? Do you have an example?
I just wanted to emphasize your point, because indeed we've seen that packaging is very key in helping increase sales, basically, which may sound like a very basic marketing message. I should say, seeing some of the questions in the chat, all the examples I'm giving here come from a public study we did 2 years ago with Gain on how to market nutrition to the base of the pyramid. And it's all available online on Hystra website, probably still on Gain website as well. So you can find the names of the company and more details there. But to go back to packaging and branding, so going back to the example of Nutritious I was mentioning earlier, this program supported by NGO GRET in Burkina Faso, they basically supported various infant porridge manufacturers, helping them get the right formula, etc., but also helping them on their marketing strategy, and in particular helping them redo their branding and packaging and logo. And this basically, for one of the brands they supported called Natavi, led to a 20 times increase in sales between 2006, where they were selling 75 tons a year, to 2013, so in 7 years, where they were basically selling 1.5 thousand tons a year. So branding can really be an effective, strong tool to increase sales. It's something not to forget if we try to have a nutrition impact as well.
Yeah, and it's not only about sales. We did the same exercise in Indonesia for, again, it was micronutrient powders, but for the government product. And we showed the same in an acceptability study, that the utilization uptake was improved with a different positioning and branding. And so that has now been adopted by the government as well. So it's also for products that are freely distributed. I'm going to wrap up and I'm going...
Sorry, I want to ask both of you a question that's come up now while we're on packaging. Because someone asked, would you recommend improving branding on fresh foods, fresh fruits and vegetables, for example. Is there any evidence on that?
That is a really good question, and I should not pretend I know the answer. So I have no idea. I think it's really difficult and how to brand that. But I mean, the one thing, and that's not a real brand on a product, but the one thing, and the campaigns like the 5-a-day campaigns, etc. You know, those are, well, it's not a brand, but it's kind of like a sticky message that people try to push forward. Now, I personally believe that that 5-a-day message is almost impossible to achieve in behavior, in practice, in developed countries. So I'm not so, I wouldn't recommend that we do that in Africa or Asia, but I would say that you can look at branding a bit broader, and looking at the branding of a campaign to drive, let's say, the use of fresh foods. And I'm going to skip the slides, but I'll show it very quickly before. And I think we need to move on.
Yeah.
The last big point I want to make is again about that though businesses are looking at sales of their products, for nutritionists point of view, we're looking at the compliant use of the products, and they're not the same things. And how do you get not only for uptake of a nutritious food and use of that, but using that food in a way that really leads to that nutrition impact, meaning not once a week or once a month, but maybe very regularly. So what we can do are a number of things. We should first remember that if we give a message in counseling at a health center or in an advert, people see that once, but they may forget to use that and to practice that behavior when they're at home. You know, breastfeeding, again, I'd like to bring it forward. In the beginning, it's 8 times a day. And so you may have heard the message and the health center or from the community health worker. But if you're confronted 8 times a day and it's painful or it's not going well, there's a lot of moments that are needed to make the mother continue and to trigger her to stick with that recommended behavior. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that a behavior that has to be frequent, that has to be continuous, sticks in the mind of the people we're focusing at? We can give reminders. The examples that we are giving here are a couple of very cheap hand fans that we are using in Bangladesh, in Indonesia, and in Vietnam that have messages on it. But people take it home, it's in their room, the children play with it. And so it's all the time, I would say, in their face. So the take home message. You can use calendars for that. You can use, in this day of mobile, where everybody is having a mobile, you can use SMS messages. I mean, so trying to use tools to remind people regularly. You can also use rewards. That's something we've been trying to do in Vietnam. For instance, again, it's about micronutrient powders, but we are giving a present, or the project, I mean, not gain, but a present for the mothers that are compliant with the recommendation of giving a specific number of sachets for 6 months to their child. So the present comes after showing that you are regularly giving this nutritious product to the child. And I don't know if you see all the pictures on my screen, etc., or the bar below, but the graph that I'm showing is actually a graph that I wanted to talk to you about. This is about a project in Bangladesh where the largest NGO of the world, BoP, who has 40,000 or over 40,000 community health workers, they are distributing and selling micronutrient powders. They've been doing that, and GAIN has been working with them for a long time, but sales kind of stayed the same, despite the fact that the community health workers had been trained and were counseling mothers. But we were not able to get the use of the micronutrient powders up. And then we started looking on a monthly basis, basically analyzing the sales, understanding where did it work best, where didn't it work, and discussing with the sales force. And we started implementing trainings, not only on the counseling on why to use micronutrient powders, but also on communication techniques, on how to convince when people have a resistance. We implemented an incentive scheme to reward the community health worker if she had a client that would use the MNPs for 6 months. Similarly, you can have subscription schemes where people pay up front and getting then maybe the porridge for a month delivered at their doorstep. So there's ways in which we can stimulate that. And we have to be very, from a nutrition perspective, really thinking about that just one-time use isn't going to do the trick. I'm going to skip the following 2 slides. It's an example of Indonesia on a campaign that GAIN has developed. If you want to know more about it, ask me later on. But this is actually a campaign where we apply the lessons that I've been talking about to behaviors that are not involving products, but it's just about fresh foods, it is about breastfeeding, it's about snacking. So I'd like to wrap up, go to the conclusion. Final poll, and then we'll quickly hand it over to you guys for the discussion and the questions. So in this poll, we'd like to hear from you if you have picked up a couple of lessons from this presentation. And we've pointed out 6, and again, I think you can choose more than one answer. So what have you picked up? I'm not gonna read them out loud, I'll just talk a bit slowly and let you read it. Do we give nutritional information to sell, or doesn't that sell? Low price, is that the point? Or is it colorful packaging? Or do people not spend any money? What is it? I will start counting again. I know it's a lot of reading.
Sorry, someone's pointed out they're only allowed to choose one.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
A multi-choice poll, but maybe something went wrong in the back end. So sorry if you can only choose one. Choose what you think is the most important message from the webinar rather than all of them. Sorry.
Okay, I think you've now voted, all of you. We have chatted through this. So it would be great if we could start seeing the answers to this. And I'm sure that all of you have noticed that there's more than one good answer, but there's also more than one bad answer. And interestingly, this is, I mean, first of all, consumers buy foods that make them feel good about themselves. Yes, that's the biggest percentage that has given the answer. And I think it goes back to also, we want something that tastes good. So I'm really happy that all of you are very much conscious of the fact that it's about what we want as a consumer, not that our rational thinking gets in the way. It's a lot about what we want. Now, what is interesting is that the nutritional information does not sell products as only 8 votes. So that means that, I mean, I can't say that other people think that nutritional information will help to sell products. I will talk to some of these points a bit in my wrapping up the conclusions. I'm not going through all of these now. So the title of this is Nutrition and Health Do Not Sell. I should have changed the title. Nutrition and health benefits alone do not sell. It's very important, but what we try to tell you is that it's definitely not enough. So hammering on the nutrition and health benefits is not going to convince people to use a nutritious food. Marketing and promotion of those products are about immediate satisfaction, including the convenience, the aspirations. I want to be a modern person. I want to buy what my richer neighbor buys. And the food has to be appropriate and fitting with local habits. So those are ones. The image you see here is from the report that Lucy referred to, and I'll put it up later on. A second lesson, as we said, is that poor consumers are not just looking for cheap products. So let's not only look at cost. Yes, price is extremely important, but they also want quality and trust, and they give a value to brands. Brands are not only something to promote a company. Brands have a meaning to consumers. And consumers look for a magic price. And before the meeting, actually, Lucy told me the magic price also means that product that you can buy for that one coin. So in West Africa, if you can buy something for 100 or 200 francs CFA coin, that's magic. But it also means what we showed about the PKL product, the positioning between the cheapest ones that are not fortified maybe, and the premium ones. So those are lessons. Then on the marketing and compliance, we have to drive aspirations. Don't put people down because they're poor. They do want to be like others. One point that I actually try to say, but not too clearly, is that any promotion and any marketing needs to be aligned with public health messages. So work with nutritionists, work with health system people to make sure that you do no harm with your promotion. That's extremely important. Effective promotion leverages trust, and trust also comes by being aligned with what the Ministry of Health is saying instead of confusing people. Convince the ecosystem of the caregiver, not only focus on the mother, also on the grandmother, the mother-in-law, etc. So it has to be a bit bigger than that. And the aspirational, I mean, I'm sure you've heard that one now. And compliance was my last message. You can do that by making it easy for people to use the product, reminding them all the time or giving them incentives. We want, after all, really to make nutrition desirable to consumers. We don't need to make everybody a technical nutritionist. We want it to make desirable. We want mothers to feel really good about themselves, good about what they give to their children, reassured that they are doing what is best for the child. Now, all of these lessons, and this is what Lucy referred to, are written down. And so the report that Lucy mentioned is called Marketing Nutrition for the Base of the Pyramid. Can be found on the Hystra website. Then there's a couple of GAIN examples, but there's also plenty of other interesting case studies in this report. Then GAIN has been working in this area for over 8 years, and we have written the lessons down in 3 reports, 3 working papers, one on business models, one on demand creation, and a third one on enabling environments and regulatory issues, which I haven't spoken to today. So next week, and then I'm going to hand over to Caroline, but next week, actually, the webinar will be led by Lucy. The presentation will be by Lucy, and she will focus on the last 2 points. Can't seem to, oh yeah, there are the arrows on the lessons of that particular report. I think it's the same time 1 week from now. And we have a guest speaker then.
On the 19th, which is Thursday next week.
Oh, excuse me. I thought it was the 12th, but it is Friday 13th. Extremely good Friday with all of you online. Thanks, I'm sorry. Yes, it's a Thursday. And the guest speaker is Clémence Boule-Martineau, who is a project manager at the French NGO that was already mentioned several times, GRET. Over to you, Caroline. I hope you have control now.
Thanks, Madam. No, you'll have to pass it back to me again, actually, just because of that little mouse thing. But while you're passing it back, I have one really immediate request for you, Lucy. You've mentioned a company in Madagascar, one in Burkina Faso, one in Ivory Coast, and the one that increased its sales 20-fold. I know people can get them in the report. Could you just type in the chat the country and the name of the company, the country, the name of the company, so people know what they're looking for? I think people are very keen to follow up on those 4 examples in 4 different countries, if you could. We've got a good set of questions, which I'm going to group into 4 or 5. We have about 1.5 to 2 minutes on each question, so we can wrap up on the hour. We might.
I can't type for some reason, but everything is in the report, so you can find the companies back there.
Sorry about that. Okay. We also, you can see here the event page with the bit.ly, and we can put extra information on there. If it isn't all very easy to find, we can mention the specific examples that Lucy said. There's also a set of 12 blogs that were part of our theme on nutrition with a lot more information in there. So it's all on that bit.ly page. But now, to the questions. We've had one question about the importance of being context specific. Particularly the emotion point that you made, Marty, really depends on your culture. Another question about packaging being different for urban and rural areas. Or do you have any examples of messaging for illiterate mothers? Can either of you give any examples or make any comments about, obviously we all know it's context specific, but beyond the fact we all know that, any help on how to be context specific?
Maybe I'll just give one example there on the urban versus rural aspects. Actually, I think, I mean, we saw this both in Burkina Faso and in Côte d'Ivoire with the examples I mentioned. The companies there had two types of packaging for their complementary infant foods. Either one size sachet, like the ones Marty showed for Nutribon and PKL in Côte d'Ivoire, or larger packs of 400, 500 grams, which are more or less good for a week. And basically, it's true that different types of packaging were selling more or less well in different areas. And actually, even though the rural areas were poorer and the sachets were initially designed for them so people could afford to buy one at a time, I think it was in Burkina Faso, the sachets were selling better in urban areas where mothers could buy them day after day, while in rural areas, mothers prefer to buy it once at a time and then store it in their home and know that they'd have it there. Even though it represented a bigger one-time investment. Now, these type of things depend on the country, on the habits. So indeed, I mean, the generic lesson is true. You need to adapt the packaging, but how you need to adapt it and what consumers will prefer in various environments, you do need to learn from the local culture and adapt it to the local environment.
Thank you. Marty, do you want to add anything particularly? Do you have anything targeting illiterate mothers?
I have, well, I think we always have to be very, very conscious of the context and culture. But we should not forget that there are also some universal insights. And honestly, mother and child love is quite universal. And the fact that every parent wants the best for their child is also quite universal. So I think what we need to find is that middle ground where you say we look at the cultural sensitivities, we use that, but we also translate that by using universal insights, because it's also just not affordable for like a country in Indonesia, for a company to kind of develop 10 different packages, because from Papua to East Java to Lombok, people have different cultures. There are certain things you can do. And specifically in printed, you can have, you can make small changes like what we did, kind of small changes in the dresses, but you cannot, you actually have to go for what is generally acceptable. And we did one test. I'm not going into it in detail, but the one thing that we saw is that also the rural people sometimes are looking at the aspirations, like what are the urban populations doing. So I'm not saying that it's always good, but you have to find that middle ground. Don't go overboard on the context specific, but look at universal insights.
Thank you. We had a related question from Geraldine Bowdenville about comparative research, what works where and why and what's easier. But I think in a sense you've answered that. And I think in the Hystra report, you do have nice comparisons where you do your lovely Hystra style comparison of which things work well in lots of cases and which things only work in a couple. So I think, Geraldine, that's well worth pursuing in the report. But as they're saying, not everything is context specific. Do you want to add anything more on comparative research?
Very, very quickly, Caroline. I think what we don't have is comparisons between what works in Burkina, what works in Indonesia, and why, and can we take lessons from Indonesia to Burkina. What we do, what in general, and I'm sure businesses do that, you just do a lot of testing with consumers before you develop your packaging. And so that's, I would say, a comparison to what works best, targeting your consumer group before you put it on the market.
That's a good reminder. The reason our theme in December on the Hub was nutritious products at the base of the pyramid in inclusive business, but that's why we chose our January theme to be consumer insight, because it follows so nicely onto this. So that'll be out next week, all about consumer insight. We have another question about endorsement by credible institutions. How important is it to have a credible institution endorse something as nutritious?
If I may try an answer there that actually comes from another sector. What matters is to have a credible endorsement. The most credible endorsement you can get is from your neighbors, from word of mouth. But actually, that's also true in nutrition. What we've seen across the board, that's true in energy, that's true in water, that's true in nutrition. Anything that is an investment, and for these mothers, investing in nutritious foods is an investment, because we've seen it's 8 times more expensive than the basic food. And it's not always 8 times, but it's between 5 and 12, basically. So it's really an investment. Who you're going to turn to? Your friends, and ask them what they've tried and how does it work. It's true for poor people as well. And what we've seen is that for this product, after a few years, so after 3 to 5 years, word of mouth is typically always the strongest driver for newcomers, new clients, basically. They come because somebody told them. So that was one point. And so that's about endorsement. The other type of endorsement, the problem is endorsement by an international agency for a local farmer in Kenya might not mean anything at all. So you really have to find the type of local endorsement that makes sense for them, apart from the neighbors. And that's where I want to make that example from the energy sector. We've worked with Total to help them develop the brand Awango, which those of you in Africa are probably familiar with, which is the solar lanterns they're selling through their gas stations. When we recommended this strategy to them in 2009, there were very few solar lanterns of very variable quality throughout Africa. The fact that Total put their brand and put these products into gas stations gave people the knowledge that these products at least were reliable, because you knew you could bring it back if it didn't work, there was a guarantee, etc. So the Total brand in that case was actually the endorsement that made people trust the product. It wasn't an international body or a national body. So in nutrition, you'd have to transfer that to figure out what is the right endorsement for this type of product, the endorsement that people will believe in. And it might not come from an international body.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 more questions, so I'm going to let us run over by an extra 3 or 4 minutes, if that's okay. I know some people have to leave, but they had a clear 1 hour, but let's try and get through these last questions, because these are really interesting. We've had some different questions about consumer information. You've been emphasizing marketing to what people want. But someone has asked, shouldn't we try and streamline consumer information, slightly coming back to sort of the 5-a-day idea, and have standards so it's easy for people to know what is good for them? And someone else asked, should we educate consumers about what's bad for them? So, Marty, do you want to just come back on this point of, should we bother with information as opposed to aspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my points were not to say that don't bother with information. I think what we need to understand is how far do we have to get in the information, how technical can it be for people to understand. And nutritionists are known to make nutrition quite complex as well. It is complex, but we also make it complex. So I do believe that there still is a part of this is about information and awareness raising. But my main point was, don't stop there. It's not enough. You really have to go beyond. So that is one point. The second point you mentioned was about, should we also talk to people about what is bad for them? Absolutely. And I think that sometimes we're not doing that enough, but we start doing it. I mean, we're doing it with cigarettes and smoking. Again, if I may, and going to a product that's not marketed, breast milk, we do talk about how important it is, how good it is, etc. And we do sometimes, and specifically in one-to-one counseling, we talk about the negatives of infant formula, but you hardly see that anywhere out there, because these products are technically good. The practice and how people use it and the effects of that are not good. And I think we should not stay away from sometimes in certain settings also giving that message. Smoking is bad for you. That is a very strong message. And I think that we all know that certain junk foods are bad for us. And we do know that infant formula in most settings, and I'm not probably the ones that are the most, how do you say that? The strongest advisor, but I'm a nutritionist, and infant formula in most settings should not be used because breastfeeding is really what is best. So yeah, let's educate about what is bad, but let's not stop education by information only.
Let's just run to the last three questions. I'm not sure we're going to have time for questions that are still coming in. That's three good ones. There's one about, do we know anything about the impact on local food production and local food use as these nutritionist products come on the market? Lucy, you had a comment before about local and indigenous foods.
Well, yeah, it's not exactly the same point. So we didn't do any macroeconomic analysis, so I'm not going to pretend I know the answer to that. What we've seen is that unfortunately in many markets there are no local alternatives. At least I'm talking in the infant food sector there. And there are just very few places where there are some companies that have locally tried to set up quality, affordable, complementary food production. Yeah, but it's a very complicated market, and the main brands, the premium products, are mainly targeting higher level, higher socioeconomic levels, because it is very hard to sell in these areas, in these socioeconomic levels. So all I can say is I don't know if I've seen any effect of the imported product on the local ones, but I can say there are just not many local ones. We actually struggled to find good projects when we did this study, while in other sectors there are a lot of innovation coming from Africa or Asia, a lot of interesting local companies. In nutrition, there are just not that many.
I have to say, the challenge funds I've worked on, and we've had various nutritious local companies working on nutrition, including moringa products and so on, they have struggled to have enough to invest in marketing. And also more generally with the SMEs, packaging is a big constraint, not just in nutrition, but across the board, which ties into your challenge.
Yeah. Can I add, Caroline? Because I think that there's two things here. One is local foods. One is local fresh foods and how to promote these. And how do we, if we increase production of the nutritious fresh foods, will that have an impact in the market? Or will lowering prices of fruits and vegetables, for instance, have an impact on using those products? And there's definitely some economic studies that are looking at pricing policies to also drive the use of, let's say, fresh nutritious products. So that is one point. Then the second point, and again, we've been mixing a little bit, I think, in this presentation, the overall group of nutritious foods and what is needed for children. And that's quite different, as Lucy said. Now, for the nutritionists amongst us, there is scientific evidence that though local foods can fulfill a big part of the requirements of children, we also see increasingly evidence that they can't fulfill all the requirements, and notably in iron or zinc. And there's just a paper come out on that. I mean, there's several papers. So though we all want to promote foods that are locally grown, if we continue doing that, we may not make it easier for the mothers to give the food to their children that is actually really answering all their nutritional requirements for good growth. So we need to find a solution to that. Now, counseling is a very important solution, but even with counseling, because the sources of iron and zinc are more expensive, it's going to be very difficult. So I really want to make a difference between the local fresh foods that we definitely need to promote as much as possible. Then there's locally processed foods that may not all have the quality that we want from a nutritional or even a food safety perspective. And then the products that Lucy was talking about.
Thank you. We're getting more and more comments, both on labeling, the importance of information, and on pricing, the fact that price can act as a deterrent or an incentive. I think we could have a good debate. I think we need another webinar where people can just all speak. The two other questions that I was already holding on to, I think are actually most relevant to next week, because one is about micro retailers as both distributors, but as nutrition promoters. And Lucy, I know you're going to be looking at the distribution, the supply side next week, so I'm sure you can address that. And the other is actually about this issue of segmentation. Marty, you just said the needs of young children are different to the overall market for nutritious foods. And someone asked a nice question, are we talking about marketing at the base of the pyramid or towards the base of the pyramid? So I'm going to ask you if you want to give a final comment on that point, and then we'll wrap. But I think, Lucy, we will come back to consumer segmentation next week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we'll talk about distribution a bit next week. We haven't seen many programs successful at getting micro retailers to sell any complicated good. And by this, there can be nutrition. Again, it can be energy product like lanterns when they're not known yet in an area. These products are difficult sales as long as the market isn't mature. And micro retailers are usually, you might find 2 out of 100 you've trained who would manage to sell, but it doesn't justify the cost of training the hundreds. So it's tricky. I'm talking about products that people don't know yet very well. It changes once you get to soap, whatever products are already in demand. But about the pure distribution aspect, we'll talk about this next week. And what was the other question? Sorry, I should have.
I'm actually going to add one more question to that that's come in, even though. And do you have any examples of large established retailers that are supporting access to nutritious foods BoP on a scalable, commercial, sustainable basis? And Marty, we'll put the same question to you in 1 second.
A retailer?
Established retailers that have made it this and now a sustainable model.
A retailer focusing specifically on food? No. But
I have an example of that maybe. And it's not a big one that everybody will know, but there is Spar, which I think originally was Dutch and maybe German, I don't know. But Spar supermarkets are quite well known, established in specifically Southern Africa or even maybe East Africa. And so yes, they are, for instance, working with local providers. So local producers, and this is about fresh foods, to make sure that there's a link between local fresh fruits and vegetable providers that gets into their smaller supermarkets. So that is one example I would like to give. I also, if I may, but it's actually a bit of another topic. My colleague that works on agriculture nutrition has developed a concept that we call marketplace for nutritious foods, which is really about stimulating local entrepreneurs to find ways to distribute nutritious foods. And again, that can be processed ones, but also non-processed. So it's about how do you distribute milk in a way, fresh milk, in a way that makes it available to the entire community. And they have it's very interesting, a milk ATM. I mean, it's amazing. It's really, really funny. They also do things like that with fruits and vegetables or chicken producers in a way to say, okay, how do we spread from the very small scale production? How do we go one step up? It's still not very large scale, but at least making that available to a couple of thousand households.
Thank you. Very last question. Is this really working at the base of the pyramid? Or is it a segment up? Are we not really reaching the base of the pyramid in all these initiatives yet? Mm-hmm. And then
if I may answer that one, because I'm not sure who asked, but I can imagine where it's coming from. I think the person that asked the question may think about the base of the pyramid as the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable amongst us. That's not how we define it. I think you can look at the base of the pyramid and you can look at people that have incomes in kind of, let's say, 4 quartiles or 5 quintiles. And then you're looking at the lowest quintile or quartile. That includes other people than only the poorest of the poor. So if the question is, are you really talking about addressing the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable? No, because I do not believe that these people will be addressed by the markets. These people will maybe not even reached by, unfortunately, by government programs that have free delivery. They have zero purchasing power. But in the group of the last quartile or quintile, we have people that have a bit of purchasing power. We have people even in the middle quartiles that are malnourished. And so we're talking about that group.
Yeah, if we assume that 50% of the world's population is on less than $3 per person per day, and 60% in any low-income country, then we're definitely talking about a lot of that population. But as you say, not the very poorest. As a non-nutritionist, I have learned a great deal about what the issues are in the nutrition sector, some of the similarities with the broader inclusive business space, and some of the specific differences, particularly this repeat adoption and effectiveness and usage and the different client groups. So as a non-nutritionist, I want to thank you both for what I've learned, and I hope that those who have attended who are indeed nutritionists and experts in that have also learned something from the business and the marketing and the development agenda. We are going to go into more detail next week on the distribution strategies and the commercial sustainability. So please join us again. As I think we just agreed, it's the same time, but Thursday, not Friday. And with that, I want to thank our participants, I want to thank our panelists, and I want to thank the Department for International Development for sponsoring the nutrition series. Please do go to the bit.ly nutrition marketing page and you'll see all the resources there. The webinar will be loaded there itself. It'll be on YouTube. The slides will be there and many further links. Many thanks indeed, everybody.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.